Few more, oops, wrong button there. Few more rules to understand. Am I recording? Make sure I've hit the wrong button there. Yes, I'm recording. So let's go here and open the PPT. So next up after choice rules is aggregation rules. Aggregation rules determine whether a decision made by a single participant or multiple participants is needed prior to an action at a node in a decision process. So you have multiple steps in the decision process, and you have so-called nodes, which go two ways based on how you make the decision at that time. In chess, each participant is authorized to make a move when it is his or her turn. The player's action set at that juncture includes the specific physical moves to be made. While no single player fully controls the final outcome, individual players do control the decisions to be made at individual decision moments. So you have to wait and watch what the other player is doing. When your turn comes, you make your move, you must make your move, and your move depends on what the other person did and what you want the outcome to be for yourself, right? In this one-on-one situation. We'll look at other situations in a minute. Okay. However, in many legislative action situations, multiple participants jointly control which actions will be taken. So it's not just two players following each other in terms of actions. Members of the legislature may amend or not amend a bill and can cast votes that are then aggregated by an aggregation rule. No single participant has full control over the move to amend or not to amend the bill. Individuals can form groups of like-minded people to decide the aggregate outcome, but individuals cannot amend or decide not to amend the bill and so on. Aggregation rules are necessary whenever choice rules assign multiple positions partial control, so each person is not in control but together they have a control. Aggregation rules need to clarify for a group who is to decide. A new president is elected if one candidate gains 50% of the votes plus one vote. In this case, let's say a pure simple rule of 49 versus 51. A new president is elected if one candidate gains 50% of the votes plus one vote is an example of an aggregation rule. This is the majority rule, as as simple as it can get. Sometimes you have stricter standards of 2/3 majority for certain decisions and so on. Another example is the unanimity rule, where all participants in an action situation need to agree with a proposed action in order to continue with that action. For example, in a trial by jury, the jurors must agree unanimously on the verdict. Another example is that one actor can block actions using a veto, which happens a lot on the UN Security Council, for example, which is designed with something in mind, but it's not clear if the outcome is really meeting the scope. So the scope rule is not well defined in this case. For example, some members of the United Nations Security Council can veto proposed resolutions. Sometimes different participants have complementary attributes. A bank clerk, for example, is not authorized to open safety deposit boxes unless the owner of the box or an authorized agent signs a registration form and produces a second key to fit the box. So it prevents anybody just stealing or using the box to do illicit things as well, right? Moving on to information rule. So here is seller's a figure showing this. So here is the seller information, let's say on eBay, and repeated interactions produce the rating for a seller. So this one says top rated plus, and here it says 99.5% positive feedback. So if you go to Amazon, it has different kinds of information as well. Sellers must earn the designation of top rated seller based on customer feedback. So hopefully the system is set up so that you don't have fake customers feeding fake reviews and ramping up your rating, which does happen. An important part of any action situation is the information available to participants about the overall structure of that situation, the current state of the attributes of the participants, the previous and current decisions of other participants in related positions, and their own past decisions. Information rules affect the level of information available to participants. Information rules authorize channels of information flow among participants, assign obligation, permission, or prohibition to communicate to participants in positions in particular situations, and the language and form in which communication must take place. These are kind of not exhaustive, but kind of examples of how information is made available to different actors in the action arena and action situation based on their position. Seller versus buyer, and sometimes it's anonymous in the sense, or sometimes you cannot enter a review on a site unless you identify yourself, even though it's easy enough to create fake identities and so on and so forth, right? Many details, so this is hardly comprehensive in that sense. Information rules are particularly important in generating information about past actions of participants so that other participants can know who is or is not trustworthy, like this rating that we see here. So often, even before going to a restaurant or buying something, you are always making some search on finding the ratings, right? So in fact, now a lot of information is available, but then a lot of it may also be fake information. So it's always tricky, and nonetheless it's something we use for making decisions, the information rules in that sense. So here is an example: the US government service GS pay scale. I think this is general service, government service pay scale. There are very specific rules to enter and leave the different positions from GS1 to GS2 up to GS15 or whatever the highest GS is, and then you get into another category if you're a super achiever and so on. Within each GS position there are 10 different salaries. So a GS8 step 5 salary is at $42,647. Of course, this number keeps changing based on inflation and other adjustments over time as well. So the government side here provides you this kind of information: pay and leave, what you get in terms of salaries and wages. So this is the salary table 2012 GS. So rates frozen at 2010 levels for this, which gets upgraded every few years. So this is effective January 12th. Annual rates by grade and step I won't read, but here are the grades, here are the steps in each grade, and there are the numbers and details. And here in this section you get many other things like assessment and selection, how you can enter and leave, classification and qualifications, data analysis and documentation, disability employment, diversity and inclusion rules that are also included in the boundary rules, or information rule is what we are talking about. Employee relations, hiring authorities, human capital management, etc. So information you get is very detailed here, and yet it's not the same information that a person inside will have who is managing diversity and inclusion, or this is hiring decisions, promotion decisions, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's just go ahead. Payoff rules. Payoff rules assign external rewards or sanctions or fines to particular actions that have been taken by participants or to the assessment of particular outcomes. So once you are past the boundary rules and you got a position, you enter this action situation, then your actions have rewards and sanctions. An example of a set of payoff rules is the pay schedule that is used by a government agency or by a private firm to assign salaries to participants in particular positions, which I did before reading this. Sorry about that. Payoff schedules may vary in terms of the variables taken into account and the complexity of the schedule. Hourly wage payoff rules are very simple. Someone being paid according to piecework will, on the other hand, be paid by formula. Piecework is where you get paid based on the outcome. It's like a contract. You do this much, you get paid, even though sometimes contractors tell you how much it's going to cost and you have to rely on the contractor to get the job done. But often you do the work on information to find out if the reputation of the contractor is good enough that you can trust them with getting the things done properly. Performance contracts for corporate executives are frequently much more complex and state very explicitly when executives qualify for certain kinds of bonuses and how they will be paid, for example, in terms of stocks, options, cash, etc. So all this is intuitively clear, so we're just adding details and details. So I will definitely stop here and then we'll wrap up again in a couple of podcasts maybe. Okay?